Picture this. A judge sits in a Florida courtroom, watching a young woman shake her head repeatedly, rolling her eyes, acting like she's a victim of some massive misunderstanding. The woman looks young, acts younger, and her parents sit behind her, ready to defend their little girl against what they call false accusations. But then the prosecutor presses play on a video, and in that moment, everything changes. The courtroom goes silent. The judge's expression hardens. Because what appears on that screen isn't just evidence of a crime. It's proof of something so calculated, so twisted, that it makes your skin crawl. This isn't a story about a teenager making mistakes. This is about a 23-year-old woman who studied how children talk, how they text, how they think, and then used that knowledge to infiltrate their world. And before you think you know where this is going, let me tell you, the truth is far more disturbing than you can imagine. I need you to stay with me through this, because understanding how this happened is the only way we can prevent it from happening again. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to reveal will challenge everything you think you know about online safety and the monsters who hide in plain sight. Her name is Alyssa Zinger, and during the day, she worked at a grocery store bakery in Tampa, Florida. Ordinary job, ordinary life. The kind of person you'd pass without a second glance while she's frosting cakes and smiling at customers. But when she went home, when she picked up her phone, she became someone else entirely. Not just different, but dangerous. And here's what makes this case so terrifying. She was good at it. Disturbingly good. She didn't just pretend to be younger. She became younger. She studied teenage speech patterns like a linguist. She learned their slang, their emoji usage, their texting rhythms. She knew which apps they used, which ones their parents monitored, and which ones made messages disappear. This wasn't impulsive. This was research. This was preparation. And in January 2023, she found her first victim on TikTok. Let that sink in for a moment. TikTok, the app your kids are probably scrolling through right now. The app that's supposed to be harmless fun, dance videos, and comedy sketches. But Alyssa wasn't there for entertainment. She was hunting. And when she found a young boy whose profile suggested vulnerability, whose post showed he was looking for connection, she made her move. She created a persona, a 14-year-old girl, homeschooled, which explained why nobody at his school knew her. Interested in all the same things he was interested in. She mirrored his language, his interests, his energy. And then she moved the conversation to Snapchat, where messages disappear, where parents can't see, where evidence vanishes into digital smoke. Think about the level of manipulation required for this. She had to remember which lies she told to which person. She had to maintain the performance constantly, never slipping, never revealing her true age. And she did it for months, meeting this boy approximately 30 times, according to police testimony, while he believed with absolute certainty that she was his peer, his friend, someone who understood him. But here's where your blood should run cold. While this was happening, she was already looking for her next victim. By May 2023, just 4 months after starting with the first boy, Alyssa had moved on to a second target. Same pattern, same lies, but this time she went even further. She didn't just fool the boy, she fooled his entire family. Imagine this. You're a parent, and your son introduces you to his new friend. She seems like a nice teenage girl. Polite, age-appropriate. You welcome her into your home. You see her at family gatherings. You treat her like one of your son's peer group. And the whole time, she's a 23-year-old woman committing crimes against your child under your own roof. From May through October 2023, she maintained this relationship, this lie, this violation, and nobody suspected a thing. Nobody questioned her. Because why would they? She looked young. She acted young. She had perfected the performance so completely that even parents, even adults who should theoretically be able to spot a predator, saw nothing wrong. And all the while, she was documenting these encounters, creating illegal material, building a collection that she thought would remain hidden forever. But October 2023 brought a change. The second victim decided to end the relationship. Maybe he felt something was off. Maybe he just wanted to move on. Either way, Alyssa's carefully controlled world started crumbling. And that's when the mask finally slipped. Before I continue, I need you to do something. Hit that like button if this story is making you feel anything at all. Anger, disgust, fear, because those emotions matter. They're what keep us vigilant. They're what protect our children. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because this isn't just a Florida problem. This is happening everywhere, and we need to talk about it. Now, back to October 2023, when everything fell apart, when that second victim ended things with Alyssa. Her reaction revealed the true monster behind the teenage mask. This wasn't heartbreak. This wasn't teenage drama. This was calculated revenge from an adult who had lost control. She went to his house under the pretense of needing to charge her phone. Innocent enough, right? But while he was in another room, she went through his personal device. And what she found there became her weapon. There was a video on his phone. A private video featuring him and a female classmate. And Alyssa, in an act of pure malice, distributed that video through Snapchat to multiple people. She turned a private moment into a public humiliation campaign. She weaponized intimate content to destroy these children because she could no longer control them. Think about that level of cruelty. Think about the calculation required. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was punishment. And it was that act of revenge that finally brought everything into the light. The teenage girl in that video, the one whose private moment was suddenly circulating among her classmates, did something incredibly brave. She didn't suffer in silence. She didn't let shame keep her quiet. She went to the police. October 2023, a teenage girl walks into a Tampa police station and reports that someone named Alyssa Zinger is distributing material featuring her without consent. That single act of courage, that refusal to be victimized silently, opened up an investigation that would expose the full scope of Alyssa's crimes. Detective Amanda Baranowski took the case, and what she discovered should terrify every parent watching this. She couldn't find any record of a 14-year-old Alyssa Zinger in the school system. No enrollment, no academic history, nothing. But there was a 22-year-old Alyssa Zinger in the system. And suddenly, the pieces started falling into place. This wasn't a peer-to-peer situation gone wrong. This was an adult systematically targeting children. As Detective Baranowski dug deeper, the pattern emerged in horrifying clarity. Multiple victims, overlapping timelines. While she was in a relationship with one boy, she was already grooming the next. She was working through a social network of young people who knew each other, using her relationship with some to gain access to others. And here's what's truly disturbing. Some of these kids had no idea they were all victims of the same person. They thought they were dating different girls. They didn't realize that the homeschool 14-year-old who seemed so interested in their lives was actually the same 23-year-old woman manipulating all of them. When Detective Baranowski interviewed the first victim, the details painted a picture of psychological warfare. The boy described how Alyssa would become aggressive when upset, how she would threaten him, how she tried to control his relationships with others. He told police she had threatened to have him jumped by high schoolers when he tried to break up with her. And even in her threats, she maintained the fiction that she was a teenager with teenage connections. The manipulation went beyond the physical crimes. This was psychological torture disguised as teenage drama. But there's one piece of evidence that shows just how long Alyssa had been perfecting this deception, and it comes from a place you'd never expect. In July 2023, months before the case broke open, Alyssa and one of her victims were detained for shoplifting at a Nordstrom store. Body camera footage from that incident provides a chilling glimpse into her skills. The footage shows what appears to be a teenage couple caught stealing. The officer asks standard questions, and Alyssa plays her role perfectly. When he asks her age, she says 14 without hesitation. When he asks about contacting her parents, she acts nervous but believable, exactly how a caught teenager would act. But then comes the moment that should have exposed everything. The officer runs her name and finds a 22-year-old Alyssa Zinger in the system. This should be game over, right? But watch what she does. Without missing a beat, without panic, without stumbling over her words, she provides an explanation that's both believable and impossible to immediately verify. She says it's her half-sister with the same name. The officer buys it completely, documents that she's going home with the boy and his father, and they're released. No further questions. No verification. Just a perfectly delivered lie that gets her out of a situation that should have ended her crimes months earlier. Let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about this. How many times did she practice that lie? How many scenarios had she planned for? How deeply had she thought through every possible way her cover could be blown? Because that level of preparation, that calm delivery under pressure, that's not someone making mistakes. That's someone who knew exactly what they were doing and had contingency plans for everything. Drop a comment right now with your theory. Do you think her parents knew what she was doing? Do you think they suspected anything? Because what happens next is going to make you question everything about how this family operated. In November 2023, Tampa police executed a search warrant at the Zinger family home. Body camera footage from that day reveals a family in crisis, but not the kind you'd expect. From the very first moments, it's clear this family has a very different understanding of what's happening than the police do. They're not acting like parents who just discovered their daughter committed heinous crimes. They're acting like people managing a legal problem. Alyssa's father immediately starts setting up narratives. He talks about his daughter having problems and developmental issues. He says this shouldn't be happening. He presents her as a victim. A victim? Think about that. His adult daughter is accused of systematically targeting and exploiting multiple children, and his first instinct is to position her as the victim in this situation. He tells the officers that his wife works for the federal government and has never been in trouble. He says they're good, honest, hard-working people. He says his daughter got mixed up with the wrong crowd, even though, and I quote, he's a lot younger. He's characterizing the victims as the problem. He's inverting reality so completely that it's almost impressive in its audacity. But what's even more disturbing is how rehearsed it all sounds. This isn't a parent struggling to make sense of shocking revelations. This is someone delivering talking points. And when police ask for Alyssa's phone, something very interesting happens. The father produces a phone. He says he believes it's hers. He's cooperative. He even offers to charge it for them when they discover it's dead. He makes a point of saying how helpful he's being, how he could have been obstructive if he wanted to, but he's choosing to cooperate. Except that phone wasn't Alyssa's device at all. It was her mother's old phone, one that hadn't been used for calls since 2021, one that never had social media apps installed on it. When confronted about this discrepancy during later searches, the family claimed Alyssa's real phone had been lost. Just lost. Gone. Vanished. The one piece of evidence that would contain communications with victims, proof of her deception, documentation of her crimes, just mysteriously disappeared. And you're supposed to believe that's a coincidence? During that same search, Alyssa's father says something that reveals the psychological dynamics at play. He gets emotional and says, "One good thing has come out of this. We've got our family home. We finally got our daughter back where she plays with us and watches TV. She hangs out with us now." Think about what that statement means. He's describing the arrest, the criminal investigation, the exposure of his daughter's predatory behavior as something positive, as something that brought their family closer, as if the real problem was that she was spending too much time on her phone, not that she was using that phone to commit crimes against children. And throughout all of this, throughout the searches, the questions, the explanations, Alyssa herself is largely silent. She lets her parents do the talking. She lets them make the excuses. She lets them provide the explanations. She's comfortable allowing others to manage the consequences of her actions. That's not the behavior of someone with developmental delays. That's the behavior of someone who's learned that other people will clean up her messes. If you're still watching, thank you. I know this is heavy. I know it's disturbing. But understanding how these predators operate, how they manipulate not just their victims, but entire families and systems, that's how we protect the people we love. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we're approaching the most shocking part of this entire case. What happened when Alyssa finally had to face a judge who saw through every lie? When police returned to the Zinger home in January 2024 for a second search warrant, this time to photograph Alyssa's bedroom, the family dynamics became even clearer. They'd had months to process what was happening, months to come to terms with the charges, months to reflect on the harm caused. But nothing had fundamentally changed. When officers explain what they need to do, Alyssa's concern isn't about her victims. It's about her privacy. It's about what people will think. even facing serious criminal charges. Even months into an investigation that has exposed her as a predator, her primary concern is still her own reputation. At one point during the search, she makes a comment that reveals everything about how she sees herself in this situation. She says they're acting like she's a murderer, as if the crimes she committed aren't serious, as if systematically deceiving and exploiting children is just some minor offense being blown out of proportion. That statement, that complete lack of understanding about the gravity of what she's done, would persist throughout the legal proceedings and would ultimately seal her fate in court. By the time Alyssa appeared for a bond hearing in April 2024, prosecutors had built a case so damning that even her carefully crafted teenage persona couldn't save her. Judge Laura Ward presided over the hearing, and what happened in that courtroom became one of the most quoted moments in Florida legal history. Every time the prosecutor presented evidence, Alyssa would shake her head, roll her eyes, act like this was all some terrible misunderstanding, like she was a victim of a witch hunt. But Judge Ward was watching, and Judge Ward was not impressed. At one point during the hearing, the judge stopped everything and addressed Alyssa directly. She said, "Every time something happens that the state puts on that maybe you disagree with, you shake your head no. You don't seem to understand that the problem is not who recorded the video. The problem is you are in multiple videos with young boys. You are an adult. You are the problem here. Your actions on these boys are illegal, and it's not okay, whether they took the video or you took the video. You're the only adult. Let those words sink in." After months of manipulation, after elaborate lies, after a family system that enabled and protected her, someone finally said the simple, devastating truth. Alyssa Zinger was an adult who knowingly targeted children. Everything else was just noise. But the hearing revealed something even more shocking. Prosecutors argued that Alyssa's parents had actively helped her cover up her crimes. They presented evidence that the phone switched during the first search warrant wasn't an accident. It was deliberate obstruction. Judge Ward addressed this directly, questioning how parents could help their daughter to the extent that it interfered with a criminal investigation. The body camera footage from that first search was played in court, showing Alyssa's father presenting what he claimed was her phone, never mentioning it might be the wrong device. When the real phone was never produced and the family claimed it was lost, prosecutors argued this was evidence of deliberate destruction of evidence. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about one woman's crimes. This was about a family system that protected a predator even after her actions were exposed. The defense team's strategy during the bond hearing followed a predictable pattern. Blame everyone except Alyssa. Her attorney argued she had developmental delays stemming from childhood bullying. They pointed to an individualized education plan from her high school years as evidence of cognitive impairment. They tried to paint her as someone who genuinely didn't understand the difference between right and wrong, someone who saw these boys as her peers because her mind was stuck at their level. But prosecutors had receipts. They pointed out there was no evidence of developmental delays beyond a standard IEP, which can be created for various learning differences that don't affect moral reasoning. More importantly, they presented evidence of Alyssa's sophisticated planning and deception. She had maintained elaborate lies across multiple relationships for months. She had navigated complex social media platforms with expert precision. She understood exactly how to manipulate emotions and control situations. And when caught shoplifting, she had immediately created a believable lie about having a half-sister with the same name, a lie sophisticated enough to fool police officers on the spot. Does that sound like someone with diminished capacity? Or does that sound like someone who knew exactly what she was doing and had planned for every contingency? Detective Baranowski's testimony during the hearing provided even more damning evidence. She revealed that Alyssa was moving quickly to criminal activity, sometimes within days of first meeting victims. This wasn't someone slowly building relationships because she thought she was making friends. This was someone with clear criminal intent moving as fast as possible before getting caught. The detective also testified about text messages and videos recovered during the investigation, messages that showed Alyssa claiming to be a teenager while simultaneously demonstrating adult knowledge and sophisticated manipulation tactics. When asked if there could be additional victims, Detective Baranowski confirmed they were still working to identify everyone Alyssa had contacted. The possibility of more victims, more families destroyed, more young people traumatized, hung over the courtroom like a dark cloud. And through it all, Alyssa sat there, shaking her head, acting like none of this was real, like she was a victim of some massive injustice. But then came the moment that changed everything. The moment when all her lies, all her performances, all her carefully constructed defenses crumbled into dust. The prosecutor played one of the videos. I can't tell you what was in that video. I won't describe it. But what I can tell you is that when it finished playing, the courtroom was silent. Judge Ward's expression had hardened into something cold and final, because that video didn't show someone with developmental delays. It didn't show someone who thought she was a peer engaging in age-appropriate behavior. It showed an adult, clearly an adult, engaging in calculated criminal activity with someone who was undeniably a child. All the excuses, all the claims about mental capacity, all the defense arguments about her not understanding what she was doing, they all evaporated in the face of that evidence. You can't claim you thought you were a peer when the video clearly shows the age difference. You can't claim developmental delays when your behavior demonstrates sophisticated planning. You can't claim innocence when the evidence of guilt is right there on the screen for everyone to see. Judge Ward didn't hold back. She told Alyssa directly, "You showed no regard for the safety of these young boys. You've been preying upon them. You have been taking advantage of them. And you have been abusing them." Those words, delivered with quiet intensity, cut through every defense mechanism, every lie, every excuse. This was no longer about legal technicalities or diagnostic criteria. This was about fundamental human morality, and Alyssa had failed that test spectacularly. The judge ordered her to remain in jail without the possibility of bond until trial. No electronic devices, no contact with victims, no opportunity to continue her predatory behavior. And when asked whether criminal charges against Alyssa's parents were possible for their role in obstructing the investigation, prosecutors declined to answer, saying only that the investigation was ongoing. That silence spoke volumes about just how deep this family's involvement might go. But beyond the legal proceedings, beyond the courtroom drama, there's something we need to talk about that matters more than anything else. The victims. Let me tell you what this cost them. These boys thought they were in relationships with peers. They shared their feelings, their fears, their intimate moments with someone they trusted. And then they discovered it was all a lie. Every conversation, every shared secret, every moment of vulnerability was part of an elaborate deception by an adult predator. One victim told police the relationship was ruining his grades, making his life hard. He described feeling like he couldn't escape because Alyssa was always trying to talk to someone, always maintaining control, always exerting pressure. But the psychological damage went even deeper. This victim also told police that Alyssa had dated 4 other boys at his school to try and make him upset. He didn't know those other boys were also victims. He thought they were rivals. He had no idea that all of these relationships were actually the same adult systematically targeting his friend group. Imagine the isolation. Imagine the confusion. Imagine discovering that your understanding of relationships, trust, and intimacy was built on elaborate lies told by someone more than twice your age. Another victim described Alyssa's behavior in terms that sound like typical teenage drama until you remember she was 23 years old. He said she had a crazy ego when mad, that she talked like she was invincible, that she thought she had all the power in the world. He described instant texting, crying, screaming that she hated him, followed by apologies and emotional reconciliation. That cycle of emotional extremes, that pattern of abuse, it's textbook psychological manipulation. But when it's disguised as teenage drama, when performed by someone claiming to be a peer, victims don't recognize it for what it is. They think it's normal. They think it's just what relationships are like. And that's exactly what makes it so damaging. These boys will carry this trauma for years. They'll question their judgment. They'll struggle with trust. They'll wonder how they missed the signs, even though there was no way they could have known. Because Alyssa was that good at deception. She had practiced, prepared, and perfected her performance to the point where even trained police officers didn't catch her lies initially. And here's what should terrify every parent watching this. This can happen to your child. Right now, tonight, while they're scrolling through TikTok or Snapchat, or whatever app comes next. Because predators like Alyssa aren't going away. They're just getting better at hiding. They're studying the platforms. They're learning the language. They're perfecting the performance. And unless we stay vigilant, unless we talk to our children about these dangers, unless we create environments where kids feel safe reporting suspicious behavior, this will keep happening. So let me ask you this. What are you going to do differently after hearing this story? Are you going to have a conversation with your children about online safety? Are you going to check their social media more carefully? Are you going to teach them that adults pretending to be peers is never okay, no matter how believable the lie? Drop a comment right now telling me one thing you're going to do to protect the young people in your life. Because awareness without action is just entertainment. And this story deserves more than that. Now, there's one final detail about this case that needs to be addressed because it reveals something important about how predators operate in court. When Alyssa took the stand in her own defense, the strategy backfired spectacularly. The defense had spent months building a case around her supposed developmental delays and cognitive impairment. They argued she couldn't distinguish between right and wrong. They claimed she genuinely thought she was a peer to these boys. They painted her as someone who needed help, not punishment. But when she testified, she was articulate, responsive. She demonstrated clear understanding of complex legal concepts. She answered questions with sophistication and nuance. She showed no signs whatsoever of the cognitive impairment her defense team had claimed in trying to prove she could participate in her own defense. She proved she was fully capable of understanding exactly what she had done. It was a devastating own goal that undermined every argument her attorneys had made. The mask had finally come off completely, and what remained was simply the truth. An adult woman who had chosen to prey on children and was now facing the consequences of that choice. As of the last updates available, Alyssa Zinger remains in custody awaiting trial on multiple charges involving her systematic targeting and exploitation of young people. The investigation continues, with authorities still working to identify all potential victims and assess the full scope of her crimes. Her parents face potential charges related to obstruction of justice, though no formal charges had been filed at the time of the last available information. The victims continue their healing process, supported by counseling services and victim advocacy programs designed to help young people recover from this kind of trauma. But the question that haunts this case, the question that should haunt all of us, is this: how did she get away with it for so long? She was caught shoplifting with one of her victims in July 2023. Police had her on camera. They ran her name and found an adult in the system. But she told a simple lie about a half-sister, and they believed her. That one moment of failure to verify, that one acceptance of a plausible explanation without proof, allowed her to continue victimizing children for 3 more months. 3 more months of trauma. 3 more months of crimes. 3 more months that could have been prevented if that officer had just asked one more question. I'm not blaming that officer. I'm really not, because Alyssa was that good at deception. But it's a reminder that we can't take things at face value anymore. We can't assume that someone who looks young and acts young is actually young. We can't rely on our instincts when predators have learned to exploit those instincts so effectively. We need verification. We need skepticism. We need to teach our children that it's okay to ask for proof, okay to question, okay to feel uncomfortable and walk away. Because the alternative is more victims, more families destroyed, more Alyssa Zingers operated with impunity until someone finally catches them. This case should be a wake-up call for parents, educators, law enforcement, and platform developers. The tools that connect our children to the world also make them vulnerable to predators who have become frighteningly sophisticated in their methods. And unless we adapt, unless we evolve our protections as fast as predators evolve their tactics, we're leaving our children exposed. So here's what I want you to take away from Alyssa Zinger's story. First, online predators don't look like the monsters we imagine. They look like peers. They sound like friends. They act like people your children can trust. Second, developmental delays and mental health issues are real, but they're also convenient excuses that predators and their families use to avoid accountability. We need to be able to distinguish between genuine impairment and calculated manipulation. Third, family systems can enable predation. Parents who can't accept their child's guilt, who obstruct investigations, who provide excuses instead of accountability. They're part of the problem. They're protecting predators at the expense of victims. And fourth, victims need to be believed. When a young person comes forward with allegations of abuse, even when those allegations seem impossible, even when the accused seems unlikely to be a predator, we need to investigate thoroughly. Because predators count on our disbelief. They count on us thinking, but they seem so nice, but they're so young, but their family is so respectable. They weaponize our assumptions against their victims. Thank you for staying with me through this difficult story. Thank you for caring enough about child safety to watch all the way to the end. If this case moved you, if it made you angry or scared or determined to do better, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel because we have more stories that deserve to be heard, more cases that expose the truth about how predators operate, more investigations that can help you protect the people you love. Share this video with every parent you know. Share it with educators. Share it with anyone who works with young people, because awareness is a first step toward prevention. And in the comments right now, I want to share 3 things. First, where are you watching from? Let's see how far this message spreads. Second, what's your biggest takeaway from Alyssa's case? What lesson are you carrying forward? And third, what's one concrete action you're going to take to protect the young people in your life? One conversation you'll have. One safety measure you'll implement. One thing you'll do differently because you watched this video. Your comments matter. They help this video reach more people. They help us build a community of informed, vigilant adults who refuse to let predators operate in the shadows. So don't just watch and move on. Engage. Comment. Share your thoughts, your fears, your determination to do better. Because stories like Alyssa's zingers shouldn't just shock us. They should change us. They should make us better protectors, better advocates, better defenders of the vulnerable. And if even one child is protected because you watched this video and took action, then Alyssa's victims haven't suffered in vain. Their courage in coming forward, their bravery in testifying, their willingness to expose their trauma so others won't suffer the same fate, it all means something if we learn from it. So let's honor them by being better, by doing better, by creating a world where predators like Alyssa's zinger can't operate undetected for months while systematically destroying young lives. That's the legacy these victims deserve. That's the change this case demands. And that's a commitment I'm asking you to make right here, right now, by hitting that like button, subscribing to this channel, and sharing this video with everyone who needs to hear it. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for caring. And thank you for refusing to let stories like this be forgotten. We'll see you in the next investigation.